Hi everyone, um, my name's Kevin Ardron and welcome to my Policy and Change introduction. I think that's what I'm going to call it. Anyway, let's get the show on the road. Okay, I live in the United Kingdom and I live in England, in the northeast of England, near Newcastle upon Tyne. I live on the coast, just outside Newcastle, in a little village called Tynemouth, and Tynemouth is one of those places that is quite often described or voted as the best place to live in the northeast, and I would have to agree. It sits on the coast about 7 miles east of Newcastle, and Newcastle upon Tyne is one of those small cities with a big character, so very popular with students and visitors. And within Newcastle, there's a couple of new universities, and the university in particular that we're interested in today is Northumbria. Okay, and Northumbria is the university where I work. So a little bit more about Northumbria. Northumbria University in Newcastle has almost 40,000 students and is the largest university in the region. We have Newcastle, we have Durham, we have Sunderland, but one of the characteristics of Northumbria being a post-1992 university is that it has a very diverse provision in terms of professionally accredited programs. So I think that sort of sets it apart in some way. Famous alumni, just in case you were wondering, without this particular person, I doubt that whether we would all be using iPhones and iPads. So Jonathan Ive is credited with in inventing the iPod and all of the various derivatives. Steve Cram, sort of Olympic runner and TV broadcaster. Sting, for those of you who I don't know anything about music, I suppose, or not. You may well have heard of Sting, and Sting is from Wallsend in Newcastle. And Victoria Pendleton, Olympic cyclist and lately Everest adventurer. So those are a few famous people coming from Northumbria. In terms of the Faculty of Health and Life Sciences, it encompasses lots of departments, and the department that I work in is the Department of Social Work, Education and Community Wellbeing, and often education feels a little bit hidden within such a large institution in that respect. And within the education department sits initial teacher education. And that terminology is interesting because it's shifted from initial teacher education to initial teacher training, and that shift has happened gradually over the last sort of 10 years. And within initial teacher education or initial teacher training, my own area is School Direct, which I lead the School Direct provision, which is a partnership between university and school-based provision, and I work with primary and secondary teaching school alliances across the northeast. So that's a little bit about Northumbria. I moved into higher education in 2006 after teaching in schools for 20 years. I had 3 years in Qatar in the early 90s, which was really interesting. I'm not quite sure why I came back, but I did, and I taught in Sunderland, in Whitley Bay, and before I joined Northumbria, I was a deputy head at a middle school. In terms of policy and change, I think we could all acknowledge that it's it's an interesting time in terms of the higher education sector, and from a Northumbria perspective, we've just come through a very competitive recruitment cycle for 2017-18 at all levels. But as an example, undergraduate recruitment was down at an institutional level from 2016-17 by 2.3%, which has had some significant impact, I think, in the way in which the university executive are reporting sort of budget plans and strategy, sort of strategy implications. We met those targets in terms of recruitment, but I think, in terms of meeting the targets, I think it's interesting to consider what the impact of that activity has been and will be in terms of staffing, research activity, student experience and retention and completion rates. I think it does have an impact. It has a direct impact on staffing activity, but in terms of retention and completion, we won't know for a while. But some interesting things going on there. And it's within this sort of context of initial teacher training that my research is initially going to be focused in, although I do acknowledge that I need to have a broader perspective. But in the context of those recruitment challenges, recruitment to initial teacher training programs is further challenged by government policy. That government policy dictates long-term strategy, which is implemented by the Department for Education, and those allocation systems set recruitment targets that are very much disassociated from university strategy. And these changes to recruitment in initial teacher education in terms of entry requirements and processes, together with the teacher recruitment crisis, the issues around the bursary offer, all designed to attract candidates, really does test the resilience of the initial teacher training team at Northumbria. Our aim is always to be proactive, but it's very challenging in the face of that change when you're forced into a sort of reactive stance. Many complex challenges that face the higher education sector in general, but within that there are some particular ones that impact on initial teacher training. So I think that's the sort of context that I'm thinking about right now. But I'll just finish with this random thought about myself. And if you are ever unfortunate enough to be in a restaurant with me, it can be an interesting experience as I grill the waiters and the chefs for long lists of ingredients, and to ensure that there are no potato-based derivatives in any of the food that I get. So be warned. Thank you.